The air on neutral station Kiva smelled like nothing. That was the first thing Leila Voss noticed every time she stepped aboard, the complete absence of smell. The station's atmospheric processors were calibrated to offend no one, which meant they satisfied no one either. No salt, no carbon, no trace of the 1,000 human smells that made a place feel lived in. Just clean, dead air that sat in your lungs like a confession you hadn't made yet. She set her translation kit on the table and did not sit down. The room was a perfect hexagon, which was apparently the only shape both human and Kraveth diplomats had agreed upon without incident. 6 walls, 6 panels of neutral gray, 1 circular table of polished white stone, and 2 doors, 1 on the human side, 1 on theirs. Leila stood exactly in the center and counted her breaths the way her mother had taught her, back when panic attacks visited her like old relatives who didn't know they weren't welcome. In. Hold. Oh. Hold. 6 hours. She'd been told 6 hours by Admiral Crane, who had the warmth of a decommissioned satellite and had looked at her the entire briefing the way people look at a tool they aren't sure will hold. 6 hours, Dr. Voss. At 0600 station time, both fleets execute their firing orders unless you transmit a signed ceasehold to both command channels. Both channels. Simultaneously. He'd paused. We're trusting you with this. He hadn't meant it as a compliment. She knew what they called her in the officer quarters. The Kraveth woman. Sometimes worse. 30 years of war had a way of making nuance unpopular, and a human woman who spent 15 years learning an alien language, who published papers on Kraveth syntax and tonal philosophy, who had once said in a recorded interview that the Kraveth were not monsters, they were people, that kind of woman accumulated a particular type of enemy. On both sides of a war, the people who speak the other language are never entirely trusted. The Kraveth door opened. Ambassador Veth entered the way all senior Kraveth did, slowly, deliberately, with the full weight of their presence arriving before their body did. They were tall, the way a winter tree is tall, all vertical lines and careful angles. Their skin was the deep blue-gray of deep ocean water, and their 4 eyes, arranged in a slight arc across their face, moved independently, cataloging the room in pieces before assembling it into a whole. Leila inclined her head at the correct angle for a greeting between equals. 43 degrees. She'd practiced it until her neck ached. Veth stopped across the table from her and was still for a long moment. Then, in Kraveth, low register, formal, the tones precise as tuning forks, they said, "You came alone." "Yes," Leila answered in Kraveth. "As agreed." The humans sent their translator without a diplomat. The humans sent their translator because their translator is what this requires. She kept her voice level, her tones clean. Kraveth was a language where emotion lived in register, not volume. Anger, grief, contempt, they all rode on the pitch beneath the words, invisible to the untrained ear. Leila had spent 15 years training her ear. Ambassador Veth. "We have 6 hours." Veth moved to the table and placed both of their primary hands flat on the white stone. A gesture of intention. Of seriousness. "I am not here to perform. I am here to finish something." 6 hours, Veth agreed, in a register that meant, "and I have been waiting 30 years for them." The first 2 hours went as Leila expected, carefully, painfully, with the deliberate slowness of 2 people who have been enemies long enough to be fluent in each other's mistrust. Veth laid out the Kraveth position. Leila translated it into the earpiece Admiral Crane was monitoring from the human command ship 15,000 kilometers away. Crane responded. Leila translated his response. Veth listened with all 4 eyes fixed on a point just past her shoulder, which in Kraveth body language meant, "I hear you, but I am reserving judgment on whether you are worth believing." Standard diplomacy. Leila had done this before, in smaller rooms, with lower stakes. She was good at it the way surgeons are good at cutting, not because it didn't cost her, but because she'd learned to defer the cost. Then, at the 2-hour mark, Veth said something that wasn't on any agenda. "Dr. Voss, I need to tell you something that is not in my official brief. Something that only I know, and that I have been carrying for a very long time. Will you hear it?" Leila's pen stopped moving. In Kraveth, the phrase "I have been carrying" was not metaphor. It was a specific construction, Veth Sol Kara, used only for knowledge that had caused the speaker physical pain. The language had an entire tense structure for truths that had hurt their keeper. English had no equivalent. She'd written a paper about it once. called it the grammar of burden. "I will hear it," she said. Veth was quiet for a moment. Then, "This war began with a word." She made Veth say it twice. Not because she hadn't understood. Her Kraveth was perfect, had been perfect for a decade, but because understanding and believing are different rooms in the same house, and she needed a moment to move between them. 30 years ago, Veth said, a human translator attended the first contact summit on this very station. There were only 17 words exchanged before the session ended. The Kraveth delegation spoke a greeting, a formal greeting, the one used between civilizations meeting for the first time. It contains one word that your linguists found very difficult, because it exists in 2 registers that are tonally adjacent. Leila felt the knowledge arrive before Veth named it. The way you feel weather before it breaks. "Vethera," Veth said. The word dropped into the room like a stone into water. Vethera. Leila knew it. Of course she knew it. It was one of the first words she'd learned, because it was one of the most commonly cited examples of Kraveth tonal complexity. High register. We offer greeting, between equals, with open hands. Low register, a half-tone lower, almost imperceptible to the untrained ear, we claim dominion. We arrive as your superiors. This territory is now under our authority. "The greeting," Leila said, quietly. "Your delegation spoke the greeting. High register. As we have always used it at first contact. It is our oldest diplomatic word. It means, we see you. We come in peace. We are glad you exist." And the translator heard. Low register. Or believed they did. Or perhaps their recording equipment could not distinguish the tones accurately. We do not know. What we know is what was written in the official human transcript of the First Contact Summit, that the Kraveth opened negotiations by declaring human space to be under Kraveth dominion. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Leila had ever heard. That transcript, she said, very carefully, became the basis for the emergency defense resolution. Which became the basis for the first strike. Which killed 400 Kraveth on the station Merath. Which we answered. Which humanity answered back. Yes. Leila sat down. She hadn't meant to. Her legs simply made a decision her mind hadn't approved yet. She sat in the neutral gray chair at the neutral white table in the neutral hexagonal room and felt 30 years of war reassemble itself in her mind with one word at its center. Vethera. Spoken correctly. Heard wrong. Written down. Sent up the chain. Acted upon. 400 dead on Merath. Then 600 at Kepler Station. Then the Battle of the Voss Corridor. She had always found it strange that a stretch of space was named after her family, until she learned it was a different Voss entirely, and then the years, the decades, the grinding forward motion of a war that everyone had long since stopped questioning the origin of, because origin stories are luxuries of peacetime and there hadn't been peacetime. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Our historians found the original tonal recording 12 years ago. We debated for 11 years whether to bring it forward." "What changed?" Veth looked at her, all 4 eyes together, which was a rare thing, a Kraveth gesture of complete directness. "We found the translator." The world shrank. That was the only way Leila could describe it afterward. In the notes she would eventually write and then delete and then write again. The world shrank to the size of the room, and then to the size of the table, and then to something small enough to fit between her ribs where it sat and pressed against her lungs. "What did you say?" she asked. Her voice was very steady. She was proud of that. She was furious at herself for being proud of that. The human translator from the First Contact Summit. "We found him. He is alive." "You found him." "He has been living under a different name. On Earth. For 29 years. You know his name." "His real name." "Yes." Leila placed both hands flat on the table. A gesture she had borrowed from Veth without realizing it. "I am not here to perform." "Tell me," she said. And Veth told her. His name was Leila Voss. Her father had been 31 years old at the First Contact Summit. Junior linguist. 3rd in the translation team. The other 2 had been injured when the shuttle docked, a pressurization accident, minor but enough to pull them from duty. Elias had been promoted to lead translator 40 minutes before the session began. He had spent 8 months studying Kraveth before that day. 8 months. Leila had spent 15 years and still found new chambers in the language she hadn't known existed. He knew, Veth said, and the register they used was not anger. It was something older and more tired than anger. Our analysts believe he understood the error within hours of the first strike. The original recording existed. He would have heard the difference when he listened again. But he didn't come forward. No. Why? Veth was quiet for a moment. We have wondered this also. Our best theory is that by the time he understood what had happened, 400 of our people were already dead. And 200 of yours. And he understood that the truth would not bring them back. It would only destroy him, Leila said. Yes. She thought about her father. She thought about the man who had taught her Swahili when she was 5, because he believed every child should grow up knowing that language was a door, not a wall. Who had read her Borges and Le Guin and the Kraveth poet Vesera. She stopped at that, felt the name land differently now, and told her that translation was the most human art because it was the art of trying to become someone else long enough to bring their meaning home. Who had disappeared when she was 9 years old, and whose absence her mother had explained as he needed to find himself, which Leila had spent 20 years understanding as adult code for he left us. He hadn't left to find himself. He had left to hide from what he'd done. She asked for 20 minutes. Veth gave her 30. She used the first 10 staring at the grey wall, which was the color of nothing decided, the color of a war with no real author. She used the next 10 on the encrypted channel to Admiral Crane, who listened to her summary in silence and then said, "Dr. Voss, I need you to understand that this information cannot be verified in the time we have." "I know." "Which means it cannot be the basis for a ceasehold agreement." "I know." "And I need you to understand that what you're describing, if true, would constitute the largest criminal act of negligence in human history. The political implications alone." "Admiral." Her voice was quiet. "I know. I need 10 more minutes." She used the last 10 thinking about her father. Not about what he'd done. She'd processed that for the rest of her life, and she knew it, and she set it aside the way you set aside grief when you're still in the emergency and grief is a luxury. She thought instead about what he would want her to do now. And then she thought that what he wanted was probably irrelevant, and always had been, and that the question was what she wanted. What Dr. Leila Voss, the only human who spoke Kraveth, the woman both sides called a traitor, wanted to do with the 30 minutes she had left before she walked back into that room. She thought about Vethera. "We offer greeting. We see you. We are glad you exist." She picked up her translation kit and went back in. She spoke to both sides simultaneously for the first time. She had Crane pipe in on the human channel, and she made them both listen while she laid it out, not as accusation, not as exoneration, but as fact, as the grammar of what had actually happened. She gave them the word. She demonstrated both registers on the recording Veth provided, playing it through the room speakers so that everyone could hear the tonal difference that was almost nothing, that was half a semitone, that was the width of a door between greeting and conquest. Crane was silent for a very long time. "This changes the legal framework of every engagement," Veth said. "I know," Leila said. 30 years of war crimes tribunals. Every treaty. Every boundary agreement. "I know. The Kraveth people will need time," Leila said. "So will ours." She paused. "But first they need to stop firing at each other." She looked at the grey wall. She thought about her father in a house on Earth with a different name, watching the news, watching the war he had started by accident and perpetuated by silence, growing old in the knowledge of what one wrong word had cost. She made her decision. "I'm transmitting the ceasehold," she said, "to both channels." She looked at Veth. "I'm recommending a full joint investigation into the first contact recording. Human and Kraveth historians, together. Everything public." She paused, including the name of the original translator. "You are certain?" Veth asked. She thought about her father. She thought about Vethera. "No," she said honestly. "But I'm transmitting it anyway." The ceasehold held. It held for 6 hours, then for 24, then for 72, at which point both governments agreed to extend it pending the joint investigation. The war did not end that day. Wars never end in a day. They end in the long and painful process of choosing not to continue them, but it paused, and in the pausing created the space for something else to grow. The investigation took 14 months. Leila Voss was found in a small town in New Zealand, living under the name Martin Corr, teaching English to primary school children. He was 61 years old. He was thin in the way people get thin when they have been carrying something heavy for a very long time. He did not deny any of it. Leila flew to see him before the tribunal. She had told herself she wouldn't, and then she had bought the ticket anyway, because she was her father's daughter in at least one way. She believed that the hardest conversations were worth having. They sat in his kitchen. He made tea. His hands shook. "I heard the recording again at hour 6, he said. "After Merath. I knew." He looked at his hands. "I told myself that coming forward would only make it worse. That the war was already started and I couldn't unstart it. That I would only be destroying myself for no." "Stop," Leila said. He stopped. "I know what you told yourself," she said. "I don't need to hear it." "What do you need?" She thought about it. She thought about Vethera and what it meant, the real meaning, the intended meaning, the one that had been buried under 30 years of blood. "We see you. We come in peace. We are glad you exist." "I don't know yet," she said finally. "I'll need more time." He nodded. He understood time and what it cost. He had been paying for it his whole life. She finished her tea. She looked out his window at a garden that was very carefully kept, the way people keep things when they have very little else they can control. Then she said, in Kraveth, in perfect high register, the word her father had heard wrong 30 years ago, Vethera. He didn't understand the language. He'd never learned it properly. But he heard something in the tone, the open tone, the warm one, the one that meant "I see you," and his hand stopped shaking. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. It was just a word, correctly spoken. Sometimes that's where you start.